Okay, let's talk about the DP unit planner. We've all been there, right? You stare at a blank template and it feels like just another piece of paperwork. But what if we could change that? What if we could turn it from a chore into a creative blueprint? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to walk through this planner step by step, and you'll see it's actually an amazing tool for designing powerful learning, especially since it ties right into a framework you already know.
And yeah, let's be real. You open up the document, and this is what you see. A blank page. A whole lot of empty boxes. And it can feel a little daunting, maybe even a bit intimidating.
And that's the big question, isn't it? Where in the world do you start? Well, that's the question we're here to answer. We're going to treat this planner not as some form you have to fill out, but as a journey of inquiry. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the planner as a blueprint. Then, we'll dive into starting with the why. We'll cover how to get ahead of student misconceptions, how to actually design the learning journey, connect all the IB-specific dots, and finally, how to close that learning loop for yourself. First things first, let's get our mindset right. This planner, it's not just about what you're teaching, it's about how you're designing the learning itself. And here's the best part, it's built on a foundation you already know really well, the Understanding by Design Framework, or UBD.
So, what even makes a DP unit a DP unit? The IB gives us some pretty clear goalposts. It's got to be significant, engaging, and challenging. It needs to be driven by inquiry, build on what students already know, wrap up with a solid summative assessment, and, this is key, it has to make students reflect on what they've learned.
All right, let's get into it. The first, and I would argue the most critical section of the planner, is inquiry. And if this is feeling familiar, it absolutely should. This is Backward Design 101. It's basically stage 1 of the UBD framework. We have to figure out our destination before we even think about drawing the map. The very first thing we have to nail down are our transfer goals. Now, think of these as the ultimate long-term destination. This isn't about what students need to know for the final exam. It's about what you want them to be able to do with their knowledge years from now, out in the real world. This is the real why we're doing any of this.
So what does this actually look like? Well, for a history class, a transfer goal isn't about memorizing dates. It's about using lessons from the past to understand today. For math, it's about applying mathematical thinking to solve actual problems. You see how these are big, ambitious goals? They're all about long-term application. This right here becomes the North Star for your entire unit. Okay, next up, essential understandings. The easiest way to think about these, they're the moral of the story. As Wickens and McTighe put it, these are the deep insights, the big aha moments we want our students to have. They're not just facts to be memorized, they're the big ideas we want them to really get. So, how do you write a good one? Well, there are 3 golden rules. First, they have to be conceptual, not just a fact. Second, their whole job is to help students connect the dots between all the little pieces of information. And third, you always write them as a full sentence, usually starting with that classic phrase. Students will understand that.
Check out some of these examples. In language A, it's the idea that meaning isn't set in stone, it's constructed. In anthropology, it's that what feels natural is often just cultural. Or in biology, that structure dictates function. See, these are huge transferable ideas that give all the specific content a real purpose.
Okay, the next step in our INQIRE section is a game changer. It's about being proactive. It's about thinking ahead and anticipating where our students are going to get stuck, or what ideas they might get wrong. And this isn't about being negative, it's just about being smart and prepared. And the guys who literally wrote the book on UBD totally agree. Wiggins and McTighe say that great planning doesn't just deliver content, it actively predicts the common mistakes and builds in ways to tackle them head-on. It's a design habit that makes our teaching so much more powerful. A really helpful way to organize your thinking here is to break down these potential misunderstandings into 3 categories: content-based, skills-based, and concept-based. And if you're new to a subject, a fantastic way to identify these is to just talk to experienced teachers or dive into the IB subject reports. They're a goldmine for this stuff. All right, we have established our why. Now, it's time for the how. We are officially moving into the action section of the planner. This is where we start to blend stages 2 and 3 of UBD, designing our assessments and planning out the day-to-day learning that will get our students to those transfer goals we set. So, in this section, you're going to map out your assessments. And remember, formative and summative assessments aren't enemies. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Formative tasks are those little checkpoints along the way that give you and the students feedback. Summative tasks are the big finish, where they show you what they've learned. But a big summative task can and should still provide formative feedback.
The action section is also where we plan for differentiation. Now, it really helps to see how these three big ideas, UBD, differentiated instruction, and universal design for learning, all play together. You can think of it like this. UBD sets the destination for everyone. Differentiated instruction, or DI, is like providing different types of cars to help students get there. And universal design for learning, or UDL, is like building the road with multiple lanes, ramps, and clear signs from the very beginning, so everyone has a way to make the journey.
Now we get to the part of the action section that makes this planner uniquely IB. This is where we have to be really explicit about how we're integrating the core elements of the diploma program. This goes way beyond just content knowledge and skills.
You'll see these DP bits, as I call them, laid out right there in the planner. And you need to be specific. How are you going to explicitly teach ATL skills? Where will students practice metacognition? How will you make real, authentic connections to TOK and CAS? This isn't a box-ticking exercise. It has to be purposeful.
One of the absolute cornerstones of the DP is this idea: every teacher is a language teacher. What this means is that it doesn't matter if you teach physics or art history, you are responsible for helping students master the specific academic language they need to think and communicate in your subject, and that has to be planned for. Here's a perfect example of how to make a truly great TOK connection. You take a standard content objective, like in biology, understanding that scientific knowledge evolves. Then you elevate it. You turn it into a knowledge question that questions the very nature of that knowledge. You ask, to what extent can observations in biology be objective? Boom. All of a sudden, we're not just learning science, we're questioning what it means to know something scientifically.
And that brings us to the final section, reflection. It is so important to see this not as some extra task you do at the end if you have time. This is a vital professional practice. This is how you, the teacher, close your own inquiry loop. This idea is rooted in some really powerful educational theory. Donald Schoen famously talked about being a reflective practitioner. We reflect in action, while we're in the middle of teaching, and we reflect on action after the unit is done. This section of the planner is your dedicated space for that crucial reflection on action. What worked, what bombed, and how close did your students actually get to those big transfer goals you set way back at the beginning?
So we've come full circle. The DP Unit Planner, it's not just a document to fill out. It's your architectural blueprint. It's a powerful, creative, and intellectual tool that lets you design truly meaningful, challenging, and unforgettable learning experiences. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build?